In a world totally wrecked by freaking monsters called Kaiju, Kafka Hibino dreams of joining the defense force and kicking some serious ass. He makes a promise to his childhood buddy, Mina Ashiro, that they'll both enlist together and save humanity from these giant bastards. But of course, life throws them a curveball, and they end up going their separate ways like two ships in the night. While Kafka's stuck cleaning up the mess after Kaiju battles, he runs into Reno Ichikawa, a dude who's all about that defense force life. Reno's fire to join up and fight the good fight lights a spark in Kafka, reminding him of that promise he made to Mina. He's tired of just mopping up the aftermath and is ready to step up, gear up, and show those Kaiju who's boss. Here in this world, you've got military squads swooping in to save the day. They're the ones all over the news, looking like total badasses while they blast these beasts. But once the cameras are off, someone still has to deal with the mess. That's where the cleanup crew, like Kafka, steps in, doing the dirty work, but no one cares about them. Kafka's been grinding away in this thankless gig for a while now. One day, after warning a buddy about some nasty monster guts, the guy ignores him and gets burned. Classic. Kafka's used to it though. He knows the guy'll be fine, but there's still a ton of work to do. And of course, Kafka gets the grossest job, cleaning out the monster's insides. That's the kind of crap you don't see on TV. Later, he's chilling at home, flipping through channels, and sees Mina Ashiro, the captain of Division 3, getting all the praise. She's living the dream Kafka used to have, being a hero in the defense force. It hits him hard. Next day, he meets this rookie, Ichikawa, all wide-eyed and pumped for the job. Kafka can't help but feel even worse. And to make it more of a joke, they both get stuck cleaning the monster's guts again. Lunchtime rolls around, and Ichikawa looks wrecked. Kafka, feeling kinda bad, gives him some vitamins and nose plugs. Ichikawa doesn't want to take him at first, but eventually he caves. By the end of the day, they're both dead tired. Kafka cracks a joke to break the tension, and Ichikawa surprisingly thanks him. Then he drops some wild news. The defense force raised the age limit. Kafka might still have a shot at joining. But right when Kafka thinks things might be turning around, bam! A kaiju pops out of nowhere. Kafka saves Ichikawa, telling him to bounce and get help, but Ichikawa doesn't want to leave him behind. Eventually, Ichikawa books it, while Kafka tries to keep the kaiju busy. He's barely hanging on, flashing back to when he and Mina were kids, dreaming about being in the defense force together. But reality sucks. Kafka's not strong enough and gets smacked down by the monster. Just when he's about to get wrecked for good, Ichikawa shows up with backup. They save him, but Kafka's feeling like a total failure. Mina and her squad roll in and take down the kaiju like it's nothing, making Kafka feel even smaller. At the hospital, Ichikawa's still hyped, thanking Kafka for saving him and saying he's got mad respect for him. That gives Kafka a bit of hope. Maybe he's not completely washed up. But then, things get even crazier. A weird creature infects him, turning Kafka into a freaking kaiju monster. Ichikawa's freaking out, but Kafka tells him he's still the same guy inside. Mina's squad gears up to take down the kaiju without causing chaos in the hospital. An old man who saw Kafka transform drops dead from a heart attack, and Kafka, still getting used to his monster strength, smashes through a wall by accident. Realizing he's causing a huge scene, he and Ichikawa decide it's time to bounce. They jump right out of the hospital and tear through the city. As they're running, Ichikawa is losing it, trying to wrap his head around Kafka's transformation, while Kafka, struggling with his new form, somehow ends up chomping on a bird mid-flight. Things go from bad to worse when Kafka reverts to a less terrifying form. Kafka, feeling completely humiliated and unsure if he'll ever make it to the defense force with this kaiju problem, gets a pep talk from Ichikawa. They duck into a hiding spot, but Kafka senses something big coming their way. Turns out, it's another kaiju. With the defense force already dealing with other threats, Kafka sees this as their chance to slip away. But when a little girl and her mom are in danger, Kafka doesn't hesitate. He steps in and saves them, showing off his new strength. After helping the unconscious mother, he realizes maybe this kaiju form isn't all bad. Fired up, Kafka throws a massive uppercut that takes down the kaiju in one hit, leaving him covered in monster goo. Standing there, stunned by his own power, Kafka realizes he just took out a kaiju with a single punch. Despite his monstrous appearance, the little girl thanks him for saving her and her mom. Now more determined than ever, Kafka decides he's not gonna let this kaiju thing hold him back. Later, Mina arrives on the scene, hearing strange reports about a good kaiju that helped the civilians. Meanwhile, in the news, Kafka's kaiju form is given a name, Kaiju number 8, and it's revealed he's been dodging capture for 3 months. Ichikawa, now knowing Kafka's passed the Defense Force entrance exam, rushes to share the good news. Despite his kaiju form causing all sorts of headaches, Kafka's determination to join the Defense Force is stronger than ever. He gears up for the next part of the test, knowing it's going to be packed with officers and super high stakes. Ichikawa warns him about the risk of getting caught, but Kafka, still figuring out how to fully control his transformations, pushes forward. Even though Ichikawa's worried sick, he agrees to back Kafka. They roll up to the Defense Force base, and it's massive, leaving Ichikawa in awe. Kafka's doing his best to stay cool when they run into a girl with serious attitude. She calls Kafka old, which gets under his skin, and demands he move his car because her lucky number 5 spot is sacred. When Kafka doesn't budge, the girl, Kikoru Shimiya, straight up lifts his car and tosses it aside like it's nothing thanks to her battle suit. Ichikawa tries to explain to Kikoru how they're basically the janitors of the kaiju world, cleaning up all the nasty guts after a fight. But she's barely listening. She's way too impressed with Kafka casually lifting a freaking truck like it's a bag of groceries. She's convinced he's got some secret supersuit, and Kafka just smirks, giving her a cryptic "remember me" vibe. Ichikawa's not having it though. He's freaking out, scolding Kafka like, "Dude, you can't be flexing your powers in public. I'll snitch if you pull that stunt again." Inside the exam, Kafka's instantly out of his depth. The dude's fitness level is trash compared to these other candidates, and Kikoru's ripping into him every chance she gets, making him feel like dirt. When he tries to keep things fair, he only makes things worse, dropping straight to last place. And when he bumps into Kikoru, her bodyguards don't waste a second beating him down, while she just smiles, promising to wreck him in the next round. Ichikawa, being the bro he is, tries to keep Kafka's spirits up, saying the next part might involve kaiju disposal, something Kafka should be good at. But then, Vice Captain Hoshina drops a bomb. The next test isn't just cleaning up dead kaiju, it's straight up fighting live ones. Kafka and Ichikawa are shook to the core. Meanwhile, Kikoru's over there laughing like she's about to star in her own action movie. This year's exam is brutal. Instead of mopping up kaiju guts, they're tossing the candidates into live combat. Everyone gets special battle suits, but Kafka's already struggling to move under the weight. Kikoru, of course, is owning it, looking like she was born for this. Hoshina mentions there's one big kaiju and 32 little ones they'll need to take out. Kafka and Ichikawa decide to play it safe and stick to supporting the others. They spot a kaiju and, in a rare moment of competence, Kafka chucks a stun grenade, paralyzing the beast. He tells Ichikawa to hit its weak spot and they manage to take it down. But just as they start feeling good about themselves, another kaiju blindsides Kafka, smashing him into the ground. The control room's ready to deploy his emergency shield, basically a "you're done" signal, but Kikoru swoops in, destroys the kaiju with one hit, and throws shade at Kafka, saying, "Why don't you just stay out of my way?" Even though Kafka's busted up, bleeding, and probably should tap out, he refuses. Hoshina tells him he's pushing it, but Kafka's too stubborn to quit now. He knows if he messes up, his whole kaiju secret could get exposed. But even with Kikoru's insults still stinging, he drags himself back up. He's not about to let some rich kid or his own busted body stop him from proving that he's got what it takes, even if one screw-up could end his Defense Force dreams for good. Despite his busted leg, Kafka's too stubborn to quit the exam. The proctors let him continue, but he tells Ichikawa to go ahead without him. Ichikawa isn't having it though. Touched by his friend's loyalty, Kafka agrees, and they hatch a plan. With Ichikawa literally carrying Kafka on his back, they take on the kaiju, using Kafka's nerdy knowledge to hit the weak spots. Vice Captain Hoshina, watching from the sidelines, can't help but chuckle at their chaotic teamwork, low-key impressed by their determination. Meanwhile, Kikoru's out here putting on a whole show, making everyone else look like amateurs. She's taking out kaiju left and right, finishing the exam with style and sass. But just as she's about to claim her victory lap, things take a wild turn. Out of nowhere, a humanoid kaiju pops up and impales her. Kikoru, bleeding and barely hanging on, tries to keep fighting, but this kaiju is no joke. It's stronger, smarter, and it's winning. Hoshina and Mina see the kaiju acting way off script and rush to back her up, but they're still too far away. Kikoru's on the verge of losing it, thinking about how she can't live up to her dad's impossible expectations. Right when it seems like it's all over for her, Kafka, in full kaiju mode, swoops in like a total savage. He saves her from the finishing blow, promising her he'll explain the whole "I'm actually a kaiju" thing later. For now, he's got a fight to win. As evacuations go down, Kafka's trading blows with the humanoid kaiju, deflecting attacks like a pro. The control room picks up on Kafka's weird energy signature, and everyone's confused, wondering what the hell's going on. After a gnarly brawl, Kafka lands the final hit, dusting the kaiju for good. He makes sure Kikoru's okay, but doesn't let her off easy, scolding her for being reckless, despite how much she's hurting. Later, both Kafka and Kikoru are laid up in the hospital, recovering from the fight. Mina drops by, thanking them for saving Kikoru's life. But in a twist of pride, Kikoru takes all the credit, covering for Kafka and leaving out his kaiju transformation. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a mysterious kaiju in disguise watches, already planning its next sinister move. Kafka's nerves are shot as he checks his results, knowing this is his last shot to make it into the defense force and finally stand shoulder to shoulder with Mina. The entrance ceremony is packed with new recruits, but there's one face missing, Kafka's. Up on stage, Mina is busy praising Kikoru for preventing any major casualties, though Kikoru's guilt is eating her alive, knowing deep down that Kafka was the one who really saved her. Right on cue, Kafka shows up in his brand new Defense Force uniform, causing a stir. Everyone's wondering how he even got in after bombing most of the tests. Turns out, Hashino was impressed by Kafka's quick thinking during the practical exam, plus his selflessness in saving others. So, while Kafka isn't an official officer yet, Hashino decides to take him under his wing. Mina's speech gets Kafka all fired up, and he boldly declares that he'll fight by her side no matter what. The crowd is stunned, and even Mina seems a little pleased, though she orders him to drop and give her 100 push-ups right there. Meanwhile, Hashino's watching with a smirk, thinking Kafka's hiding something big. Later, Kikoru pulls Kafka aside, not one to let things slide easily. She warns him if his kaiju side ever threatens humanity, she won't hesitate to kill him herself. But for now, she agrees to keep his secret. Despite Kikoru smashing records and making it all look easy, Kafka's struggling. Hashino tells him point blank that he'll be kicked out if he doesn't step up his game. Still, Hashino sees something in Kafka, so he starts mentoring him. Cue the montage of brutal training sessions and a hilarious bathhouse scene, where Kafka's awkward childhood connection to Mina comes out, sparking some jealousy from his teammates. Just as things seem to settle, the alarms blare. Kafka's got his first mission. Mina's elite team is taking on a giant kaiju, while Kafka's squad is left to handle the smaller ones. The battlefield turns into pure chaos, and Kafka's barely hanging on, constantly getting barked at by Kikoru. But his squad is doing surprisingly well, even managing to catch the attention of the vets. Feeling a bit useless, Kafka's sharp eye catches a kaiju's weak spot, one that nobody else seems to notice. Using this intel, the squad manages to turn the tide of battle, and Hashino, watching from afar, is more than a little impressed. In a surprising move, Kafka pulls off a dangerous maneuver, dismantling the kaiju's reproductive organs, completely neutralizing it. As Mina's team wraps up their battle with the giant kaiju, they barely have time to catch their breath before a swarm of smaller ones closes in. Exhausted but determined, the recruits keep fighting. Just as things seem to be winding down, a strange figure is spotted standing over a dead kaiju, signaling that an even bigger threat is on the horizon. In the chaotic scene, Renu yells for Iharu to get a move on, but he's too slow and gets shot right through the chest. Luckily, his heart is spared, but the bleeding is heavy. But they quickly realize they're up against Kaiju number 9, the same beast that wrecked Kakuro during their exam. Pissed about his botched implants, number 9 is gunning for a Defense Force officer, Ichikawa, and creates a zone to cut off all signals and distress calls. At first, Ichikawa can't dodge number 9's savage attacks, but he starts to catch on, learning to anticipate the monster's moves. He creates a window for Iharu to bail. Despite being hurt, Ichika pushes Iharu to scram, realizing things are getting real. Iharu grapples with his own limits, but reluctantly pulls back, feeling like a total loser for not keeping up. Meanwhile, Ichika's fighting like a champ against number 9, even though he knows he's likely going to get wrecked. As number 9 mocks Ichika, Iharu shakes off his doubts and rushes back, saving Ichika just in time. But number 9's barrier traps them, making teamwork their only shot at survival. Even with Iharu all banged up, Renu charges in, while Iharu lays down cover fire, using his conductor bullets to hold number 9 back. But when Iharu opens a window, Renu's attack flops because number 9 shields himself with a wall of corpses. With communications down, Kafka and Kikoru realize they're close to the madness. Renu keeps pushing despite heavy damage, but number 9 looks ready to deliver a finishing blow. Just as Iharu starts to lose hope, Kafka bursts in, slicing off number 9's head and apologizing for being late to the party. Ichikawa's feeling super low, wishing he could just handle this solo and avoid transforming. Meanwhile, Iharu freaks out as number 9, head reattached, gets ready to unleash some serious pain. Kafka sets Ichikawa aside, telling him to focus on healing while he takes on Number 9. Number 9, seeing Kafka as a worthy opponent, ramps up the battle, firing off massive body bullets. Pissed off by the chaos messing with his friends, Kafka counters with a powerful shockwave and non-stop punches, forcing Number 9 to retreat. In a brutal showdown, Kafka dismembers the Kaiju, just about to finish it off, when Defense Force soldiers crash the scene. Kokuro, having taken down another Kaiju with a sign like a total boss, wonders where Iharu and Ichikawa are. Kafka decides to look for them, even with communication still down. Kaka chimes in that you can sense a Kaiju's location even amidst the craziness, but transforming in a hot Defense Force zone is risky business. Kaka jumps away to save Ichikawa, but Number 9 regenerates and makes a slick escape, vowing to come for Kafka next time. Kafka is stuck defending the officers from the remaining chaos when he sees Number 9 disintegrate to flee. Just as he's about to bounce, Vice Captain Hoshina rolls up, convinced that Kafka is the one who messed up Ichikawa and Iharu. Hoshina strikes with deadly precision, making Kafka realize just how tough he really is. Kafka's hesitating like a scared little puppy when faced with Vice Captain Hoshina not wanting to throw down and hurt anyone. But Hoshina's having none of that. He slices at Kafka faster than a damn whip, and suddenly, Kafka knows he's gotta step up. Hoshina's relentless, like a freaking machine, and Kafka's scrambling just to keep his guard up. He dodges like crazy, but Hoshina's strikes are laser-focused and his core's wide open. As Kafka regenerates, the weight of the stamina hits him like a brick. He can't take any more hits. Hoshina's eyebrows shoot up at Kafka's resilience and, charging his blades, unleashes a wicked energy wave. Kafka tries to evade but ends up losing a leg instead. In a desperate move, he bites down on Hoshina's blade to protect his core, feeling like a damn fool but knowing he's gotta fight back. He delivers a mega punch, slamming it into the ground to blow Hoshina away, kicking up dust like a ninja on a mission and using it as his getaway. Hoshina hits up Mina over the radio to update her on the situation. Meanwhile, Kikoru's deep in thought about Kafka, wrestling with whether she can trust him. Kafka, now human and completely wiped from regenerating, mumbles an apology for being such a reckless idiot. Kikoru has his back, reassuring him that Ichikawa and Iharu are in good hands with the Defense Force. She warns him to tread carefully. Exposure to officers and his brawl with Hoshina could spell trouble. As the team wraps up their missions, Hoshina's still rattled by his run-in with Kaiju Number 8. He's curious about that beast's unusual behavior. Unlike the typical Kaiju wrecking everything in sight, Number 8 fought more like a damn human, aiming for the ground instead of directly targeting Hoshina. Mana tells Hoshina to chill and promises to handle the Kaiju mess. Meanwhile, Hoshina and Mina discover that Kaiju Number 8, who messed up Ichikawa and Iharu, can shift into a human form. Over in the shadows, Number 9, now human, kills some random dude and assumes his identity to plot against Kafka. At the hospital, Ichikawa wakes up to find Kafka and Kikoru chilling by his side. He thanks Kafka without realizing Iharu is also there. Kikoru covers for Kafka, saying Ichikawa's just grateful. Once discharged, Ichikawa and Iharu are taken aback by a party celebrating their mission success. Kafka learns about Izumo's major role in anti-kaiju tech. Izumo's still refusing to talk to his dad over their past mess, while Kaguragi, who overhears, decides to mind his own business. Inside, Hoshina calms the party down and announces Kafka's promotion to a full-fledged member of the Defense Force for stepping up during the last mission. Kafka's stoked, but plays it cool. He accidentally talks out of turn, leading Mina to slap 50 push-ups on him. She reminds him of the promise he made, and that Hoshina backed him for the promotion. Later, Kafka spots Hoshina training hard, prepping for a rematch with Kaiju Number 8. Hoshina's dead serious, saying he needs to beef up to protect everyone. As Hoshina walks away, Kafka vows to meet those expectations. Meanwhile, a new humanoid kaiju, backed by a fleet of aerial kaiju, is getting ready to crash the party. As Hoshina wraps up his duties, he can't shake the freaky vibe of his fight with Kaiju Number 8. It felt like he was going toe-to-toe with a damn human, and with Number 9's ability to talk and shapeshift, he realizes just how next level these kaiju are becoming. Meanwhile, Kafka's in his head, thinking about how far he's come, but also the mountain of work still ahead. Just then, strange lights start dancing in the sky, zooming toward the base, grabbing his attention like a shiny object. But what follows is pure chaos, a devastating attack that sends Hoshina scrambling to activate emergency protocols. Observing the mayhem, Kafka contacts Hoshina, pointing out that wyvern-type kaiju, usually lone wolves, are now attacking in a coordinated strike. That screams there's a strong leader calling the shots. Hoshina identifies the boss of the bunch, a nasty red kaiju with a fortitude of 8.3, as the biggest threat in the area. With the base under siege, Hoshina shouts orders to the platoon leaders to handle the other kaiju while he takes on the red kaiju leader himself. The red beast, obviously loving the chaos, is getting ready to bring the base to its knees. The other officers are struggling against the kaiju, barely making a dent, and are forced to pull back. The red kaiju barks orders for the gunners to use oscillator rounds, but Kafka jumps in with some wisdom, advising them to target the weak spots on the kaiju's back instead of charging in headfirst. Taking Kafka's intel to heart, the leader hatches a new plan. One team distracts, while the other targets the back. Kaguragi and Izumo pair up to execute the strategy, but a new kaiju crashes the party, throwing a wrench in their plans. Enter Kikaru, charging in with a custom battle axe designed to pierce through the kaiju's thick hide. This bad boy was made just for her after a brainstorming session with Mina and Hoshina, showcasing her strength and the need for serious firepower against the rising tide of kaiju attacks. Kikoru, rocking her powerful new axe, initially feels a bit off about its brutal look, but she quickly shows what it can do, unleashing its shockwave feature to dish out some serious damage. As she's handling another wyvern, Iala swoops in to help with freeze rounds, grounding an aerial kaiju so Kikoru can deliver the final blow. Impressed by Iala's growth, she asks him to tag along for the next wave of kaiju. Meanwhile, Hoshina's locked in a fierce brawl with the red kaiju leader, struggling to catch a breather. The red beast, clearly loving the thrill of the fight, smashes through Gate 3, sending Hoshina flying into a building with a massive punch. Despite the wreckage, Hoshina manages to block a hit and even lops off Red's arm. Now that Red's separated from the rest of the officers, Hoshina resolves to go all out, ready to protect his crew. Another officer gets trapped by a wyvern. Kafka, racing against the clock, partially transforms to save the officer from a wyvern's blast, leaving Mina stunned by his newfound speed. Just when the wyvern gears up for another attack, Kikaru jumps in, smashing the creature aside like it's nothing. She tells Kafka to get the injured to safety and then come help her out. Kafka, impressed by how the team is moving as one, shifts focus to helping the wounded, while base reinforcements start pushing the kaiju back. As the action unfolds, Hoshina is locked in an epic showdown with Red, who's morphed into a massive form with even more fortitude. Hoshina is clever, targeting gaps in Red's armor, but the kaiju keeps regenerating and powering up. As the battle gets intense, Hoshina is feeling the heat from Red's sheer size and strength. Sensing Hoshina's in a tight spot, Kafka bolts to help, even though he's feeling wrecked and in pain. Hoshina's pushing himself to the limit, determined to find and exploit Red's core weakness, because that's the only way they're getting out of this mess alive. Hoshina is hanging on by a thread, but he makes one last wild jump at Red from a nearby building. Unfortunately, Red sees him coming and slams him across the city like he's nothing. As Hoshina struggles to stay alive, he gets hit with memories of his dad back in the day, praising his sword skills, but also saying they're about as useful as a chocolate teapot now. Right now, his shields are barely keeping him alive, and he checks on his crew. They're almost done getting the civilians out, and the wyverns are getting wrecked. Even though he feels like absolute crap, Hoshina decides he's not going down without a fight, even if it costs him his life. Red isn't fooled by Hoshina's last-ditch attempt and sends an exploding wyvern his way. Hoshina flashes back to when Mina had his back, always believing in his sword skills and asking him to clear the way for her shots. He's dead set on protecting the base as Mina's backup. Just as Red is about to squash him, Kafka comes in hot, ready to transform and save the day. As Kafka is about to transform, he hears Mina's voice over the comms, and suddenly Hoshina feels a bit of hope. Mina is chilling on a roof nearby and takes a perfect shot that blows off Red's arm. She quickly dodges to avoid getting blasted back. Even with his speedy healing, Red gets hit again by Mina's railgun, taking out his other arm. With his body barely functioning, Hoshina pushes his suit to 63% power and starts hacking at Red's legs, trying to slow him down. His suit warns him that pushing it harder could lead to some serious consequences, but Hoshina doesn't give a damn. He knows the risks, but keeps going. Red's healing makes it hard for Hoshina to keep him pinned down. Then, BAM! Kakuru shows up, swinging her new axe at Red. Even with all her muscle, she struggles to break through Red's tough shell. Hoshina seizes the chance and tells Kakuru to follow his lead. While he distracts Red, she should hit the weak spots. Their teamwork rocks, and they temporarily pin down Red. Kakuru's strength eventually drains her, and she collapses. Hoshina knows they've bought enough time for Mina to take a shot. With only one bullet left, Mina sets herself up for the perfect aim while the defense force covers her. With everyone giving it their all, Mina's bullet finds its target, obliterating Red's core and scattering his remains everywhere. They finally win the battle, and their teamwork gets a big shout out. Kafka, totally pumped by their unity and strength, feels fired up to train harder and fight alongside Mina next time. After the battle, Ichika can't help but tease Kafka about his messy face, but then he encourages him to team up to get stronger. Mina and Hoshina agree to deal with the last wyverns, even though they're both worn out. The squad commanders will clean up the mess. Out of nowhere, a massive wyvern bomb appears in the sky, threatening to blow everything to hell. With no time to escape, Kafka decides to take matters into his own hands. He reveals he's Kaiju number 8, transforms, and flies up to swat the bomb into space. The explosion is lessened, but now Kafka's secret is out, and Mina looks ready to drag him in. Kafka gets nabbed, and a board meeting goes down to figure out his fate. The deputy director wants to deal with Kafka right away to avoid a media circus and keep other countries from snatching him up. Some idiots suggest killing him or using him like a freaking weapon, but the director general wants to talk to Kafka first. Sitting calmly in his cell, Kafka reflects on his fate and the possibility of becoming a weapon. When Mina shows up to move him, Kafka feels like he's betrayed his buddies, but Ichika believes in him, and Mina lets him know they can chat freely without cameras in the truck. Mina is dead set on helping Kafka, gathering footage and stories to prove he's still human inside. She reassures him she'll always have his back. At the Defense Force HQ, Kafka is locked up in a secure facility, and the 3rd Division is reeling from his capture. They remember Kafka's bravery and contributions, wishing he could come back. Mina wants to quickly compile Kafka's good stuff to help his case before anyone tries to off him. Meanwhile, Hoshina is itching for a fair rematch with Kafka, and Kakuru begs her dad to let Kafka go, but he's as hard-headed as a brick wall. Seeing Kafka only as a kaiju, Kafka endures some brutal physical exams, thinking about his desire to reunite with his friends. The 3rd Division is rocked by news of their redeployment due to damage at their base and the appearance of new kaiju. They're being split up to prepare for incoming threats, a plan that's been in the works for ages. Izumo is skeptical and thinks about calling his dad for help with Kafka, but Kaguragi reveals he's already hit up his former military commander for backup. In Kafka's cell, Iso shows up and has Kafka's bindings ripped off, but then he makes his intentions clear by attacking, showing zero trust in Kafka's humanity. Iso plans to use special gauntlets to dispose of him. Despite Kafka's attempts to stay composed and prove he's still human, he takes some serious beatings, including losing an arm, as Iso goes all out on him. Iso is hailed for his strength, and it shows he's got a reputation as the Defense Force's strongest soldier. After crashing to the ground, Kafka is forced to transform more of his body to withstand Iso's brutal attacks. Iso relentlessly hunts him down with wicked kaiju weapons. Despite Kafka dodging like a boss and trying to recover, Iso wrecks his legs and prepares to deliver a fatal punch. Kafka manages to block Iso's punch by fully transforming, but he loses control as his kaiju instincts kick in. Now driven purely by his monstrous nature, Kafka charges at Iso with deadly intent, completely out of control. Meanwhile, Hasegawa is grinding it out in intense training, spilling his motivations to Hiroto, who's basically rolling his eyes, doubting Kafka will ever come back. But Hasegawa's got that optimistic vibe, which gets Hiroto fired up enough to hit the gym too. The platoon leaders are all gathered, penning letters begging for mercy. At HQ, Mina's on the sidelines, watching as the general sizes up Kaiju number 8. Kafka's rampage is off the charts, swinging wildly and keeping General Issa on his toes like he's in a damn dance-off. After a huge explosion, Kafka regenerates, and Issa realizes he's got to ditch his human mindset if he wants to survive this mess. The fight escalates, tearing shit up in the HQ as Kafka's powers go into overdrive, towering over Issa like a freaking skyscraper. Inside Kafka's mind, he's battling for control while Issa's throwing punches right back. They go toe-to-toe, landing heavy hits like they're in the main event of a boxing match. Kafka's getting overwhelmed by his kaiju instincts, scared he might accidentally take Issa out, especially with Shinomiya watching and freaking out over the chaos. In a moment of desperation, Shinomiya starts reminiscing about the good times with Kafka, contemplating if she's got to take him out. But then, Kafka's spirit kicks back in as Mina steps in, reassuring him that she still believes in him. Just as he's gearing up for a final strike, Kafka punches right through his own chest, starting to disintegrate like he's in a damn superhero movie. As he fades away, he's desperately trying to remind everyone he's Kafka Hibino, not just some kaiju number. Out of nowhere, a sword is about to take Kafka's head off, but General Issa jumps in, telling the 1st Division captain to chill the hell out. The captain, peeling off his mask, starts questioning Issa's judgment and what the hell's going down with Kafka. In a meeting with the Defense Force bigwigs, Director Shinomiya's fighting for Kafka, but the skepticism is thick because of his kaiju rep and past screw-ups. The higher-ups are grilling Mina about her testimony, hinting at favoritism because she's close with Kafka. But Mina's got her heart on her sleeve, passionately shouting out Kafka's achievements, especially pointing out how he saved their asses during the Sagamihara operation and showed real guts against Kaiju number 10. Despite her heartfelt speech, the leaders just can't shake off the fact that he's still a kaiju. Mina then digs into a personal memory, painting a picture of Kafka's humanity during a tough spot in her childhood. She hammers home that Kafka's got a human heart, and he deserves way more than just being tossed aside as a monster. But the higher-ups are still cold, revealing they just want to know why Kafka even bothers protecting humanity as a kaiju. In the end, they decide that kaiju number 8 is too much of a risk to keep around, and they resolve to take Kafka out and find a replacement. General Issa drops the hammer, announcing that Kafka's fate is sealed, leaving everyone in the room with a heavy sense of dread.